Learning to critique. These are general guidelines. So what I've noticed is many times students have never really been taught how to critique each other to be productive. And so this is a little bit of guidelines to show you what critique is all about and how it can help in your learning process. So a professional writer or designer or artist learns to systematically organize their knowledge and how to design and write and create well. So one area of knowledge is how to do a professional critique. It's a really detailed, rip it up, tear it apart kind of critique, hitting it from all angles until every weakness stands raw and exposed. So when you are at the professional level, you'll be able to do this for yourself. So one thing you really need to understand is a critique is a gift. One of the worst things that can happen in the creative fields is to be ignored. So if someone has taken the time to critique your work, they deem you worthy of their time. If you're not worth their time, they will not take the time to critique your work. So there's a process. The process goes like this. First, you listen to the self-determined goals or the premise of the creator, right? Then you never criticize the author or their goals personally. This is not a personal attack. And you never use the words like and dislike. It's kind of irrelevant whether or not you like or dislike something. So let the author know if this is not your favorite type of art. I think that's important. Or game or story or whatever you're critiquing. And then write down your impressions as the player or the reader, the viewer of what it is they've created. So critique as you would want to be critiqued. Be constructive and be respectful. So there are three things that the audience experiences, right? So first you have the hook. The hook is what draws the audience in. And then there's the burn to what it is you created. And that's what happens when the audience is experiencing your work. And then there's the after image. And that's what the audience remembers after they have left your work. So reference these in your critique in each category. So categories of critique, what worked, right? Try to give feedback on what could be changed. Give examples of improvements if possible. Praise where praise is due. There are aspects of the work that you would want to eat the designers or the authors or the creators' brains so you can absorb their brilliance. Or at least there are bits of the work that you enjoyed, aspects that are well done. So then you can take a look at what didn't work. Focus on some specific things in the submitted piece of writing or art or a game that the author might address to make the work smoother or clearer or more enjoyable to experience from your perspective. Aspects of the work that you felt were lacking or needed enhancement could be points of confusion, points where the game or the story or the art lost your interest, points when you were bumped out of the immersive experience in some way, and passages or elements that you felt detracted from the enjoyment or the clarity of the work. So then you can move on to what might work better. So here lies the danger of creators critiquing creators. We love to give suggestions based on how we might have created a work differently. It's a good thing to give general suggestions based on proven techniques and rules of thumb, but often the more creative you get with how to fix a particular issue, the less useful your suggestion becomes because it may not align with what the creator really wants to do with the work. So once you have your thoughts together, there's presentation of your critique. Come prepared. Start with a summary of your understanding of the work. Have your summary critique written out so that you don't have to search through the manuscript for your line edit notes. Always start with what worked well about the work that you're critiquing. What good things do you hope the creator will leave untouched? Next, address any questions or areas of concern that the creator specifically created on the feedback on or requested feedback on, assuming that they actually requested feedback on something specific. Then give the critique of what didn't work for you about the work. Don't be afraid to be critical in a fair and constructive way. Focus on the work, not the creator. In short, be of assistance. Don't be destructive. So, on the other side, you will receive critiques. So the first thing you need to know about receiving a critique is crave that criticism. You're going to be told a bunch of things that the speaker didn't like or thought didn't work about your work. This can hurt, but it is a good thing. If someone tells you about your work is perfect and amazing, what can you do with that to improve? Nothing. It's not helpful at all. Specific praise can help you know what to keep in your work, but praise without criticism is even less helpful than a generic rejection slip. So, good critique is the feedback that you can use to make the work that you love even better, and therefore more likely to be distributed, published, and exhibited, and loved by many others. And it is the feedback that you need to improve your creative skills overall, which is a lifetime pursuit. So, secondly, don't take it personally. Remember that critique is not about you as a person. It's about the piece of work that you submitted. You are a student of the art you have chosen. And just like someone learning piano or karate or ballet or crocheting, you're not going to perform perfectly right away, and even masters make mistakes and continue to learn. What is being critiqued are the ways in which you can improve the work and refine your technique, not the intelligence or talent behind them. So there are many versions of true. You will hear conflicting critiques. This is because each person reads a story or experiences a game or work of art from any other person with different tastes, experiences, pet peeves, and focus points. Conflicting critiques might be equally valid for the type of player, reader, viewer who gave them. So don't assume one is wrong because it conflicts with everyone else's or because it's more critical, but rather consider the merits of each critique against the work you wanted to make, and the critique against the audience that you hope to experience it. Okay? So perhaps if you're hearing a voice that you've never heard before, or a point of view you've never heard before, perhaps there is a segment of the audience that this critic is representative of, and you should listen to them. So write down the important bits. You will hear many issues and suggestions thrown your way. Write down the ones that resonate with you, that you are excited about and implementing, that you feel you should really consider. This gives something to do rather than just sitting with a fake smile while crying inside and picturing the critic being skewered by sporks. And it will also save you time sorting out the good stuff later when you have a pile of critiques to dig through. It's also good to capture points made during the free-flowing discussions that might not be written down on anyone's critique summary. So don't waste a chance to learn by defending. You will have a limited time to follow up on the critiques during the session. Make the most of it by getting more information rather than giving it. This is assuming that you are critiquing in person. Don't waste your time. What you really meant, clarifying the so obvious truth that some readers missed or some players or viewers missed, revealing how everything will somehow make sense when the work is done, or just talking about your work because you love it or you want to share it with anyone so badly. but that isn't going to do anything to improve your work or keep the next person who experiences it from having all the same questions and issues. And if someone really wants to hear more about your work, they can always ask you about it after the critique session on their own time. Instead, if you're unsure of what a particular critic meant or need some help understanding how to address the issue or suggestion they raised, you have other questions about how to improve your work, ask those questions. For example, Joe said X didn't work for him, and that makes me think I didn't do a good enough job making Z theme or idea or fact clear. Does anyone have a suggestion of how I could make Z even clearer? If you have no immediate questions, then just say something like, thank you for the excellent feedback. I reserve the right to corner some of you with questions later. And let the next creator have their turn. So after everything, the aftermath. So not all critique is correct or what you need to improve. You guys keep that in mind. Some critiques point to a valid problem, but offer the wrong solution. Some are just a factor of the player, or reader, or viewer not being your audience at all and simply not getting it. Though I would caution you to not dismiss painful truths because they just don't get it, without first asking why they didn't get it. Some critiques are the critic attempting to show their own knowledge on some topic. And some critiques are very correct but painful and to think about when implementing. And some are brilliant if you want to make completely different work. So look past the suggestion. Address the problem. Often the readers will provide their suggestions on how to fix an issue if they had that they have with your work. You can certainly take their suggestions, but more important for you is to understand why they had that problem with the work to begin with. Then you can decide if and how to change your work, not to make it the way that the player or reader or viewer wanted necessarily, since everyone will have a different idea of how to fix the problem, but rather to make it so that the future audience members don't even perceive the problem itself. So 9 out of 10 critics agree. If there was a general consensus about a point of confusion or something that most players or readers or viewers didn't like, that is likely something you want to address, even if the solution is painful. Also consider the market you're targeting. Did you place your work in the right place for the audience? The second thing you might think is like, Joe is just a stupid head, right? Perhaps you feel Joe's suggestion is just due to the fact that he didn't understand fact X, which is perfectly obvious to you, to which other players and readers and viewers just got just fine. In that case, you can certainly ignore his entire concern and suggestions. Or you may still want to make sure that fact X is clearer so the next person who has the same perspective as Joe doesn't also miss it. Whether to ignore or make changes depends on how likely Joe is to be your target audience or the agent or editor considering your submission. How big a change you would have to make, how critical understanding of fact X is to the work successfully doing what you want it to do. So look at the bigger picture. You must also try to keep perspective on the work as a whole. The critic's suggestion might sound really good for this one aspect, but is it true to the premise that you have set up in the rest of your work? Will it require you to make changes in many other places, which may raise new issues, which will require more changes, which may lead to even more changes? Choose your own path, right? What you've written, when you've written a story or about space knights, and Jane said, I don't get how the Force works, why some people have it, others don't. This is a sci-fi story, but you don't have to make it sound like magic. I think you should explain it, make it more sciencey, and maybe have some kind of symbiotic life forms or something to generate or something, right? So that's possibly a critique you might hear, right? You have several options on how to use that critique. You could take Jane's specific advice, add symbiotic life forms called mini Floridians that generate the force, and then info dumpy conversation to introduce and explain them. Or you could take the wise old man's line about energy fields surrounding and binding us and coming to life and add, but it's not magic. It's the highest realization of our potential and our connection to the galaxy on a level of our instruments cannot detect, beyond the quantum, beyond substates, beyond our need to freaking explain it. Now let's get on with it. Or you could get rid of the force from your story altogether, and then there would be no question about it. Or you could go the other way and make the force clearly magic. In fact, you could decide to rewrite the entire thing as a traditional fantasy story. Or you could go off on a major rewrite in an attempt to purge your entire story of anything that smacks of science fantasy or fantasy elements, going for a hard sci-fi story. Or, of course, you just leave it as is and assume most people won't be like Jane, or that Jane's question is not one that will detract from most people's understanding and enjoyment of the story. What's important is this. Search your feelings. Only you can decide which of these actions, or another action altogether, is the right one for your work. Remember your premise. The most important thing is to not try to incorporate every suggestion or even the good suggestions that would move the work away from your premise. Before you make any revisions, try to summarize the perfect version of your work based on your premise and what about it excited you enough to create it in the first place. That will help to make sure you're not losing your work and whatever changes you make. So, in summary, critique as you would want others to critique unto you. Absorb critiques of your work, process them, use what makes your work better, and discard what does not. Learn from everything. The critiques of your work, your critiques of other creators' work, and the critiques that other critics give to other creators. And have fun.